how can businesses use eco-friendly practices to not only comply with regulations, but also grow successfully? Our guest today is Heather Johnson. She is the CEO of Ingenium, which is specializes in hazardous waste management, and she has over 25 years of experience in this industry. Her innovative vision for sustainable waste management has positioned her company as an industry leader in waste to energy programs and zero waste initiatives. And so we're going to talk about that here today. I'm really excited to have her here. Heather, welcome to the Leaders of Transformation.
Hi, Nicole. Thank you for having me today.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. And you know what? It has been a while since we've been talking about doing this. So finally, we are here. And
finally,
I do want to do a shout out to the team at Interview Valet, because they've been sending me amazing guests like for years now. And I've had a lot of people say, how did you get so successful as a show? And one of the big reasons is that I have amazing booking agents like Interview Valet, Tom and Karen Schwab and their team that send me amazing guests. And so that makes a huge, huge difference. So thank you to them. And if anyone out there is looking for someone to get them on shows, they are an excellent choice. So you can go check them out. All right, plug for them. Let's get back to you, Heather. Let's talk about hazardous waste management, which I'm sure is a fun conversation to have. I mean, you're passionate about it. Tell us a little bit about how you got into that industry and, why you even launched your own business in that industry.
Sure. And just to go back to that fun conversation, it's funny whenever I'm on an airplane, which is often, people ask me what I do, and I say hazardous waste management, and it's the last thing anybody expects to have a conversation about. So it's a big deal, and yet people aren't thinking about it typically ever, I don't think.
Yeah.
And for me, I wasn't looking for it either when I first got into the field. It's been almost 30 years now. And I was just going to college with an intent to get a degree in business administration. And I had a job answering phones for a company like Ingenium at the time. And really one thing led to another. And as opportunities presented themselves, I took advantage. And that's what got me here to where I am today.
Awesome. Well, okay. So tell us a little bit more about what you do and what makes it so innovative in the industry.
So hazardous waste is not a new concept. There's been hazardous waste via regulation for 40 plus years, 50 even maybe. And the difference between Ingenium today and even when I got into the industry almost 30 years ago is hazardous waste was typically a nuisance and managed as either being burned, incinerated, or in a landfill. And as more regulation has presented itself, more things have become regulated as hazardous waste. And there's become this greater push to be more environmentally friendly. And what we've done as Ingenium for over 15 years now is focus on more sustainable ways to manage hazardous waste. Is there something else we can do with the material before it becomes a waste? Is there a way to recycle it once it is a waste? What else is out there? And today, more than ever, there's more technologies presenting themselves as options to manage hazardous waste.
So, I mean, we all need to do this, right? Like if we have locations and we're producing waste, we need to manage it. What's the roadmap to that in terms of how do we do that? And maybe talk a little bit more about this zero waste certification. Maybe people have heard about it and they're like, oh God, there's another thing on the list. How do we create a plan to do that in our businesses?
So typically when you start a business, if you're using hazardous materials, there's permits and all kinds of information that's provided to you on how to be compliant. And a lot of newer businesses will hire consultants to help them navigate the complexities of the regulations. And as they grow, they tend to hire people internally to continue to manage the programs surrounding the hazardous waste. If you're starting a business and you're using chemicals, to be honest with you, even things that you don't think about, generally speaking, in your business might have to be managed as hazardous waste. Just like with in your household, when you're using different materials that are in your garage, for example, You can't just throw them in the trash when you no longer have a need for them.
So, okay, so how do we, so they hire you, to come in and help them to develop a roadmap for this. How do they determine like the programs that they're eligible for? Because like you said, there's different things that you can do with them. And then you actually are like a waste management. So you actually have drivers that come, you actually are transporting this stuff too, and maybe talk a little bit about that whole, service that you provide in this.
It's a great topic because we are actually a transportation company. So that's what we do for the customer. But what we also do that's different from a lot of businesses is we come in and we take a consultative approach. So we'll come in, hey, Nicole, what are you doing? What are your goals? What are you trying to accomplish here? And then we'll work to put a program together tailored specifically to what you're trying to accomplish. And a lot of companies don't do that. They just come in and they say, what are you producing here? Okay, here's what we can do with that. And usually if they don't, if so, we're what's considered a broker. We don't own any technology. That opens us up to being able to take your waste anywhere with different partnerships that we create. If I owned an incinerator or a landfill, I'd be working to move your material into my technology. So that's a good thing about Ingenium that's different too. We can figure out what you're looking for and find the best home for that.
Got it. Got it. So, what are some of the industries where you would most often be called in? I mean, there's like manufacturers and so forth, but even within that, what industries are most, that most need your services and maybe are not using your services, but need your, like that. Right?
Yeah. We do a lot of work with the pharmaceutical
Okay.
industry. And on the biotech side, there's a lot of research and development. So think of all the chemicals back in your chemistry lab, all the little different compounds and
Mm,
reagents. They use a lot of that kind of material. And oftentimes they'll use a chemical one time, decide it doesn't work for whatever they're trying to create, and then it becomes a waste, technically. But if we can come in and say, hey, we can find another company that can use that material before you waste it, that's a way to be more sustainable and not just. And by the way, it's really expensive to buy these chemicals, and it's also really expensive to dispose of them. So any way to continue the life of something, we actually call that our orphan chemical program. So what you don't want, someone else might have a use for, and we can help with that transaction per
that
se.
is
But
awesome.
also aerospace, all the manufacturing tied to aerospace. We do a lot of business with aerospace in Washington. In Texas, it's oil and gas. So kind of geographically, there's different industry as well. Most businesses that are making something have hazardous waste.
Hmm. What is the like percentage of waste that can be repurposed? I don't know if you know this, versus waste that cannot be.
I don't know that, but I can tell you some businesses, and it's not even industry specific, but I can go into one business and recycle or repurpose almost all of their stuff, and another I might not be able to find any opportunity. So it just really depends on what they're working with and what there might be a market for.
What are the most toxic wastes that are very popularly used, that are really toxic, that if like a company was able to recognize that and then start finding something else that they could use instead, could make a huge difference,
Yeah, there's a lot of solvents.
Okay.
One of the things that is highly toxic is mercury. And
Mm.
I know several years ago they started coming out with non-mercury thermometers. Now, some people will tell you they don't work as well. So you're
Mm.
always combating changes in technology with how it works in your process or whatever you're trying to do. And I think there's a lot of chemicals that are trying to be replaced, but they don't always work as well. Some of the most toxic chemicals that they even that are illegal, you're not even supposed to have them. They work really well, but they're highly toxic. So hard to replace some of that stuff.
Yeah. 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 So how can businesses, like I said, like how can they overall start to create like the transformation that's needed in this? Because, like, to your point, some of them, work really well, and they go to some eco-friendly thing. It's like detergent, right? Like,
Yeah.
I got the eco-friendly detergent, but does it get my stains out? Well, it's kind of a moot point if it doesn't. So, like, let's say a business is saying, okay, you know what, we know we need to comply with regulations, but we also need to grow successfully, and we need to produce a product that works. Like, how do they balance that?
I think it's a challenge, and I can tell you, I'm seeing businesses push back on suppliers. So not just focusing on what they're doing, but what they're receiving. So what someone else is doing that results in the end user having a waste product, and this even spans beyond hazardous waste, stuff that just goes into the general trash. There's a lot of waste per
Yeah.
se, and so businesses are saying to their suppliers, "What can you do to help this bigger picture environmental initiative?" And because they do need to have products that work for people, or they don't have businesses. So it's a balancing act, really,
Mm-hmm.
figuring out who you're working with, who's got eco-friendly products that you can work with, and
Mm-hmm.
then how do you make the most eco-friendly product. When
Yeah.
we bid on customers, a lot of the proposals, the request for proposal, include asking us to tell them what we're doing to be more environmentally friendly, and not so much what we're going to do for them, but in our own business.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very important for people, for public companies, especially when they're telling their shareholders what they're doing to be more sustainable as an organization.
Yeah. Now, you're a woman in a business or an industry that is predominantly male oriented. How has that been a barrier? Has that been like a challenge to relate on that level? I mean, I mean,
I
I'm
get
a
asked that a
yeah,
lot.
yeah. I know, like, sometimes women are like, it's a, there's this ceiling and so forth, and other women are like, nope, I just bust through that thing. So,
I,
like, I was just curious what your experience is with that.
my experience is I've never felt like, oh, I'm a woman in a man's world. It's
Mm-hmm.
either I just have a high level of confidence and it's never affected me, or I'm oblivious. I don't know. But I can tell you that by learning the industry and being the expert in the conversation, it's hard not to respect me regardless of my gender.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So you're the bust through.
Yeah.
It's funny because it's such a big conversation now, and I get it. I get that some women have been, and especially in corporate environments, have been hindered in that way. Maybe a solution is to start your own business,
Yeah.
and then you can be the boss, and you
You're in
can,
control.
yeah, yeah. So that's good. Well, so you talk about also like your involvement in nonprofit organizations. Tell us a little bit about that, and how are you how are you extending that sustainability beyond just like transporting for and working for the companies that are your clients?
I wish I could tell you there was a direct correlation, but some of
Mm-hmm.
the stuff that I do is not really tied to the industry that I'm in. It's just more to contribute
Mm-hmm.
to the community.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a good question, and I bet there's a way I could do that if I put some effort into figuring that out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what are you passionate about in terms of like when you talk about community involvement and creating transformation in the community?
I'm passionate about helping women in leadership. So back to your first question, for me personally, and do I feel like there's a glass ceiling? No, but I want to help other women feel that same power, I guess, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
to not be hindered to rise up as leaders. And I'm not doing much of that now. I don't have a lot of time to do that, but I that's what I see myself doing as I evolve in the future.
Mm-hmm. Got it. So, what's the when you like that's how you you're busy now, right? So, as you look at the future of sustainable waste management, it's just going to get busier, right? As more and more regulations come in and more interest in it, like from a consumer perspective, supply chain, and all that. Um, what do you see that future being like? Like, and even AI coming into this picture, like, how does that all
AI is a
play
big
in?
topic that
Mm-hmm.
everyone's trying to figure out what it means to their business. And even in some of my groups of colleagues, we talk about who's going to be first on the scene with the next best thing with AI. It's kind of unknown. It's pretty fresh. Even people studying AI that I've talked to are kind of like, we're learning as we go, and it's pretty fresh. I can tell you in the more immediate, and you touched on it earlier, was our zero waste initiative. I think there's going to continue to be pressure to minimize waste in general. And it starts with understanding what you even have, what you're producing currently, to get a data set and a starting point for where you can focus and get the most bang for your buck. So our zero waste initiative starts with like a dumpster dive. Literally, we'll get into the trash and we'll start pulling what are your people in your organization throwing in the trash. And oftentimes these leaders, they have no idea what's going in there, and they're surprised too when we provide them with a report on what exactly is in their trash. And so from there we start with a plan on where to reduce, what we can do, what they can do inside their organizations to get the most out of the process. And that's really starting to get legs. We've been doing it for I think 3 years now. Again, as businesses are getting more pressure from shareholders and at the top to do things differently, that's something of interest to a lot of these larger organizations.
Mm-hmm. So what have I not asked that, because I don't know this industry.
I
This is
know.
your expertise. I'm like out there in the ocean, swimming around going, I don't know. Tell me, what do we need to know that we don't know? You
Well,
know?
you're doing great because I think educating people like yourself who don't think about this stuff every day. And I think, you know, we as consumers, not on the business side, but as, individuals in our households, we're using a lot of chemicals and things that aren't good for the environment. And I think just to be mindful of that is important. I know because I'm in this business, I'm more mindful than I was before because I didn't know that hairspray was toxic and batteries were bad, and just there's so many things that shouldn't go in your trash. And not that we can stop consuming because we're used to doing so much, but I think the awareness is really key, so that maybe if you just do one thing differently, you're making a difference if the aggregate of the whole is doing that. So I like your line of questioning because you don't know, and that I think more people don't know than do.
Yeah. Yeah. And hopefully, yeah, through this, that'll change. Right. And even just the curiosity of it. I've heard people say that, friends of mine who are saying like recycling doesn't really matter. And still, like even today, right? It's like, it doesn't matter. Or we don't need to separate it out because they throw it all in the same place. Does that really happen?
I don't know for sure. I know that there's a lot of things that can be recycled, and those that can, like think of cardboard. You can
Yeah.
you can recycle cardboard. It's an easy one. But I've heard that the trash companies are allowing consolidation, and then they are separating on their end. I don't know if that's true or not. I haven't verified it. But recycling does matter. Maybe not. Maybe things aren't being recycled to the extent we're being led to believe, but there are
Mm.
ways to, and I like to use the word reuse, because recycling is what you're going to turn a product into potentially, right? But the reuse is continuing. Like if I have some, let's say nail polish remover or something, and I don't have a need for it anymore, if I throw it in the trash, I'm just dumping hazardous material. But if you say, oh my gosh, I could use that to clean my computer parts, or I don't know, this kind of stuff goes on more and more with people finding ways to not waste product that is remaining.
Hmm. Yeah, and that sounds like, because you're brokering it, it sounds like it's actually possible to do more of that than we actually realize. I think that's one of the things that I've gotten out of this conversation is like this idea of, wow, you know what? Yeah, how much of it's like somebody's junk is somebody else's treasure, same kind of deal. is look at it and saying, okay, so I have this hazardous waste. I have this, I don't even call it that because I'm just calling it chemicals, or I have this, this excess. And, most people think about how do I get rid of that versus who else could use it. And so like, even I can imagine, I can see like marketplaces, propping up, brokers like you, marketplaces propping up where people are like, hey, I got this. Now some of them may not want to admit that they have that. So there's that problem. But, it's like, I don't want to put it out there and say, hey, I got this going, this stuff that I need to get rid of. But, being able to disperse that and to reuse it. So now it's already been created, but now let's make the most of it. If it's going to be out there, make the most of it as opposed to just dumping it and everybody,
yeah, you have to be
somebody else has
motivated.
to, yeah.
So some people, it's easier to throw it in the trash than post on these forums and find somebody to take what you don't think has any value.
Mhm.
So, but it's a great idea. And there are a few platforms doing that. I don't know how successful they are, because shipping hazardous materials has regulation around it too. So it's a little bit more complicated than selling a pair of shoes or something like that.
Yeah, that's where you come back in and you're the broker and you're like, okay, I
Mm-hmm.
need to take this from here. So, before we wrap up, in terms of size, companies that you work with, what would be the smallest, what would be the largest, so that people kind of have a sense of whether or not you could help them with
So
their
we
waste.
can work with any size company. We work with small companies that might produce one 55-gallon drum per year. And then we work with companies that ship 100 drums at a time. I mean, there's nothing we can't do. We can either partner with, some of our partners to help or move it on our own trucks.
Got it. Well, Heather, thank you for enlightening us a little bit on this unique topic. I wanted you to come on and talk about it because it isn't something that we've talked about really. And that's maybe part of the problem is that nobody's talking about it. And so nobody knows really, they kind of know it like it's out there, as a thing, waste management or toxic waste. But what do we do with it and who moves it around and solves the problem? That's a different thing. So I want you to come on and talk a little bit about that. So thank you for doing that. And then we'll make sure, of course, your links are all in the show notes so people can get to your website, and also your social links if they want to reach out to you and connect as well. So thank you.
I appreciate that. And thank you for having me, because anytime I get this opportunity, I'm able to share and provide the awareness that we're talking about as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And who knows, maybe there's some women out there who are going, hey, I could use some insight and mentorship from you. So you know what? I'll bet you that
Absolutely.
what you have to offer in terms of that experience over almost 30 years in a leadership role in a company like that, like a unique company that is in a male dominated space. But regardless, to do that, I know you have lots of value to bring to the table, and your personality and your directness. You know how to, you know how to make things happen. So I'm sure that women will be able to learn a lot from that. So
Thank you.
yeah.
Thank you.
Well, I always say leaders of transformation take action. So if you're listening out there, or for our listeners or viewers, take action on something. Maybe it is just before you throw that next thing in the garbage, is to say like, okay, is this recyclable? Is it not? Is it reusable? Can we find another purpose for it? Start to become more aware. So we talk about transformation on this show. The first step to transformation is awareness. And then there's a choice. What are we going to do with that awareness? And then we've got to obviously follow through on that choice and make the change. And so awareness, choice, change is what creates transformation. And it's all about action, right? It's all about stepping in and saying, okay, I'm going to do something rather than do the same thing I've always done, get the same results I've always gotten, or that societally we've all gotten, that we start to make small changes, incremental changes that have a compounding effect, just like compounding interest, have a compounding effect on our environment and our planet. So I encourage you to take action on something today. We'd love to hear your stories. You can go on leadersoftransformation.com. Let us know how this has impacted you. If you have questions or comments, We'd love to hear them. And of course, you can find us on social as well and follow us and share this. If you happen to know a company out there that is producing, which a lot of companies are producing toxic waste and or have excess, you know what, share this with them and say, hey, have you thought about this? Have you considered this? You can be an advocate and an ambassador for this awareness process. So we encourage you to do that. We appreciate you being here. Thanks for joining us. And we look forward to seeing you next week on another episode of the Leaders of Transformation.